So when it's very hard to come to us now, and it's like some kind of issue and stuff. I'm coming to just I mean, to look at it because I'm coming to sit now, just taking a shot.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SAR's April meeting. For tonight's meeting, it's with great pleasure to have the return of Lisa Jones. Lisa is an evolutionary astrologer, teacher, and dedicated practitioner with a holistic and grounded approach. She holds a certificate in applied astrology, diploma in counselling, and certifications in Australian bush flower essences. Alongside her client work on the east coast of Australia, Lisa is passionate about organising boutique astrological retreats like the Sacred Sykes Journeys to Greece. Being a certified peer group leader and tutor, she is actively supporting the growth of education of astrology within the wider community. So for her talk tonight, The Mysteries of the Waterhouses, could we please put our hands together and welcome, say, Lisa again. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and thank you, SARS. I'm going to have to put these on and you're going to have to just bear with me putting them on and off. I just also admit this person. There we go. Because I have a rotten eyesight, so just bear with me. So thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, SARS, and thank you everyone for being here, as well as thank you everyone for being online, because all our time is precious. So I'm very happy to be back. I'm going to do it already. I'm very happy to be back. Oh, I actually haven't been here. I spoke online last year and now I get to come and meet some of you face to face. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint in a minute and I'm going to do my very best to, I guess my goal for tonight is to open maybe one or two doors and perhaps remind you of some things you already know about the Waterhouses, and maybe introduce a few things that you hadn't thought about, to be able to get you to explore ways of working with them. So I guess I'd really love to ask, you're happy for me just to, yep. I'd really love to ask, and I know I can't get the answer right now from the people online, but who is, are you people seeing clients, whether you're doing it in a like, I'm sure everyone is professional in the way they do it, but are there people here that are sitting with other people working with their charts? I know, yeah.
I've done it in the past, none of the mornings.
No, that's it. I mean, for me,
That's all.
The most important thing for me is that we can submerge ourselves in astrology so we can grow. And evolution is about growth. And so that's the most important thing. And I think most of us probably come to astrology to learn about who we are and grow as souls. And as an evolutionary astrologer, I believe that, you know, the feeling memory that's imprinted in the DNA of our soul is, you know, paid forward into this lifetime for us to decode it. And so that we can release ourselves from whatever's once held us back, that's embedded here. Nothing here, that's voided, so that we can heal, release, heal, grow, evolve, and free ourselves from some of the things that have trapped us in previous lifetimes. So, as we would all know, all of us here in this room, all of us online, that astrology can be complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that they are two different things. And so I have had wonderful teachers. Always the teacher turns up when you're ready for them, I believe. And I've always been taught that simple is profound. So that's what I'll try and do today, to give a goal of keeping it simple and just opening a few doors, because obviously in an hour and a half, or a little longer perhaps, you know, the Waterhouses are a very, very big topic. So who has, I mean, whether you have no planets in Waterhouses certainly doesn't mean that those houses are not active. Sorry, just let that person in. But who in this room, and I mean, please feel free to chat in the chat as well, I won't be able to read it though, just so you know, but please put it in there. Who has planets in water houses? So pretty well everybody in the room. Okay, so hence why you're here. So me too. I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets in water houses and my south node. So it's always been an area that's fascinated me. So let's jump into the recording. Let's try the PowerPoint even. That'd be good. So Benjamin, I'm going to do it this way and this way.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to
Go full screen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just doing it a slightly different way than I normally do, and then it'll be this one.
I think you'll have to maybe click on this bit.
Okay, that's fine. I did check before, sorry, I wasn't going to include this slide. Look, just very briefly, I do lots of work with OPA. They're the Organisation of Professional Astrology, and in conjunction with beautiful organisations like SARS, we are all here to learn and work together. So OPA, I'm not going to say too much about it other than they do have a great certification program, which you may not be interested in, but they also have a great membership, which works a little bit differently. Can't turn up in person. They're all online, but certainly it's a great organisation that I think together we can all grow our community. I don't need to say any more than that. Anyone wants to ask me about it, they're very welcome. Just very quickly, 2 little announcements. This year, at the end of October, I will be going over to Bali with Maurice Fernandez and Mark Lawrenson to do a week's seminar. It is a venue I've used before. It's a beautiful place in Sanua, and it is a total submersion of all of us being inspired and invigorating and connecting to each other whilst we are learning quality astrological work. And most of you, well, you may or you may not be familiar with Mark and Maurice, but they are both wonderful astrologers. And between the 3 of us, we all have a slightly different essence, so you get to learn lots, and that's happening in October. Payment plans, all sorts of things. So if you're interested in that, please let me know, email me, whatever, I can let you know. And if Bali's not your thing and you prefer to go to a Greek island, every year I am going to Greece teaching Greek mythology and astrology for us to step off the treadmill of life and be able to find some stillness, and do that through the gift of astrology and mythology. And again, if anybody, they're very reasonable, much more than people think. So if you'd like to know anything about that, I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Do you go to Greece in a particular month every year? Or?
Generally April, May, September, October. Yeah. They're the nicest times of the year for that, doing something like that. Yeah. So the mysteries of the water houses. And, you know, I am an evolutionary astrologer, but I also started out as a modern astrologer. So I'm probably going to combine a little bit of both, but really and truly, regardless of what type of astrology we practice, the water houses often get very misunderstood. You know, people get to the 4th, 8th and 12th houses, whether we're sitting with people with their charts or just trying to understand them ourselves, and go, oh God, you know, the amount of times I hear people say, I've got Saturn moving into my 12th house or my 8th house or any of these houses. And really they are complex. There is a lot of undercurrents, but they're very powerful. And I guess because we all have planets in water houses, we have a draw to them. So I would like to just share something. These are just little statistics that I found interesting in relation to water. So obviously you can all read, but I'm just going to run through them quickly. So the ocean is the largest museum on Earth, and it contains more history than the sum of all the museums on land. And yet it still remains a mystery that's being explored. You know, the oceans are a mystery. The base of the ocean, there's another whole world that exists. Yet from the surface, it can look so calm, so tranquil. And yet there's a whole life living and existing at the bottom of the ocean that we can be so unaware of. 71% of the earth is covered by water, and approximately 60% of our bodies are made up of water, and we spend the first 40 weeks of our life in water. So, it's just the feeling of this, to me, is very relevant to how the water houses are operating. 94% of the Earth's living species exist in the oceans. Like, I thought, my God, this is amazing. And less than 5% of the planet's oceans have been explored. Now, I know I'm talking about the ocean, but I feel like all of this is very synchronistic of the water houses and how they operate. And 70% of our planet's oxygen is produced by the algae that lives in the ocean. So it's pretty special, I think. Now, these are just, I'll let you have a look at this, but they're just three. The water houses contain, they glisten. But I definitely like to work with the water houses in relation to family, because the soul of the family is part of the pearls of these houses. And I hear it and see it and have it validated over and over again in my own life, in my people close to me, and with my clients. And I just put these up because I just felt, even though they're not writing about water houses, but they're so relevant. I'm just going to pick the middle one to read. The family imprints its member with selfhood. Hello. Human experience of identity has two elements. It has a sense of belonging and a sense of being separate. The laboratory in which these ingredients are mixed and dispensed is the family, the matrix of identity. And when I found these, I just thought they were so reflective of what the water houses offer us. We've only just begun, so welcome. But anyone that would like, I'm very happy to share the PowerPoint if people would like it, because I think it can be a good, I know you've got the recording, but sometimes it's a nice reference, so I'm more than happy to do that. Certainly Carl Jung, incredibly gifted man, well before his time, did so much work, and I feel he also had a lot of energy that focused around these houses. So before we look at the houses in more depth in each one, I just, when we're working with houses, I mean, each one of you will have, and everybody that's online, will have an approach to what is a house. Like, for me, the houses are certainly where all the action is, they're the fields of experience. So I just wanted to highlight for me, what are the houses? How do we work with them in relation to the water houses? So when reflecting on any or all of these houses, we know that they are going to be linked to the soul of the family, as I said earlier. And that a strong emphasis, and when I say a strong emphasis, it doesn't, certainly if you've got a lot of planets in the 4th, 8th or 12th houses, I would consider that to be a strong emphasis. But it may not necessarily be through planetary placement. It may be through rulers of these houses. It may be through transits that you are having. It may be a solar return that you have one year that has a packed 8th house. So it could be by progression. So it's not only, I've got lots of planets here, so that means I've got a strong 8th water houses. It can be through these other elements. But whatever the case, strong emphasis on these houses will almost always indicate a need for privacy and an element of retreat to something sacred for the individual. And that I have definitely feel is very valid. You are sitting with someone that has strong water house presence. You want, it's like, how do we approach our clients or ourselves or our family in a way that it is how the chart is put together? Because we have to honor, if we have lots of Capricorn And every week, this is probably not a great analogy, but we're going out and, you know, spending lots of time down the pub and speaking about things that we really don't want to share with people. Then we go home and go, oh my God, what have we done? Like, we've got to honour the parts of ourselves that are there to grow. And if we're honouring the water houses, then we have to honour our need for, is that person? You know, for privacy and confidentiality and gentleness and all of those pieces. So, oops, sorry. Patterns and cycles of the family are strong with these houses, and for the individual with strong emphasis, this could be a life work. You've got a lot of planets in these houses. You may have come in here to do a lot, you know, maybe you're spending time doing your genealogy and family trees, or finding people in your family, or discovering where you've come from. But certainly I have found that this is often the work that is being done when these houses are activated. They're also known as houses of endings. That's a very old terminology. You know, houses of life, houses of substance, houses of relationship, houses of endings. And I've often said I like to call them houses of completion, because I'm a Sagittarian, and to me that sounds a lot more optimistic. But nonetheless, they are where the work is to be done, where we are wrapping things up and tying off on things, signing off on things. The houses that are water by nature involve the feeling function. Emotional complexity is part of these houses. So if you are working or looking at a chart where these houses are a focus, there is going to be emotional and psychological complexities involved. It's just the nature of it. The terrain is deep and with many layers and many undercurrents. Like I said before about the ocean, it can look perfectly calm on the outside or on the top, and yet have all this swirling energy going on underneath. And each house, as I said before, has a connection to our ancestors, which I will talk a little bit more about as we move through. If anyone has any thoughts, reflections, or questions throughout, please just interrupt me, because I love to hear what people have to think or say, and I will ask you some questions as we move through. And just for those people that are online, if you have a burning question, Lawrence is definitely...
No, Lawrence.
Ben is, sorry. We will be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you do have a burning question, please feel free to put it in there. But if not, we'll have a look at the end if anyone's got anything they'd like to ask. Okay, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes here, because the elements, as we all know, are the building blocks. We can't, it's a little bit like the times tables. We can't do Pythagoras if we don't know our times tables. So if we don't really work with the fundamental building blocks, the elements make up the aspects. But often, we don't sometimes spend enough time thinking, oh, so this person has an earth IC. What does that actually mean? So I just put a few things together here that you can have a look at. Maybe I can just ask, sorry, I just let, there we go. Who has fire on?
I've got fire, Jupiter and Sag in house 4. I have the sun and moon in house 8, which is Aries on the cusp, but it's Taurus, sun and moon in eclipse.
Oh.
And I have Mars and Leo in the 12th. All 3 of my water houses have fiery energy.
Fire, yes.
And I tend to agree with what you just said about, it's like, I put down like an iceberg more beneath the surface then.
Yep. And there's obviously sounds like a neon sign really flashing, doesn't it, with all those planets in those houses. But so what?
Well, now, yes, but when I was younger growing up, it was beneath the surface that I could fathom and try to know how to work with all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. I can be like a neon sign. Generally, I'm not, but once I start, it'll be a flash.
Yep. Yep. I hear you. And so, you know, the elements, I think I've just put on here, you know, if we have fire on the houses of endings, then perhaps the sort of qualities that the family want to uphold are going to be fiery, inspirational, you know, electric sort of energy. And I think I've just put some things here in relation to survival, independence, confidence, etc. So, you know, when fire is here, these are the qualities for the family system that we, you know, are building from. And earth, who has earth on their water houses? Anyone? Earth, me too. So I'm not sure if you can relate, and I know we're just looking at it briefly, but with earth, you know, respect, qualities of loyalty and duty and routine and groundedness, you know, a need for security, for tradition. You know, these may be part of the roots, part of the family system that you've come into. Does anybody relate to, yeah? With the air, of course, air being very much about the thinking function. So perhaps there may be much more emphasis around just that, relationships, brainstorming, thinking, communicating, you know, a very airy sort of energy. Whereas when we have water on the water houses, you know, emphasis on things like closeness and privacy and imagination and perhaps nurturing may be parts of the theme. Now, that's not to say, you know, that because we have souls born into families where they're born into a fiery family and they're a very watery soul and they're bringing that to the family or to these houses. But I just wanted to put that in because it is just a nice reminder of working with the elements on the cusps. And of course, if someone has an interception, the possibility is that the flow of energy is interrupted, that maybe you won't have earth on all of the, you know, 4th, 8th and 12th, that maybe there's an interruption. But generally speaking, you know, that's just...
52-year-old, 53-year-old twins now.
Oh.
And they have all three of those are water sign houses. And even though I thought they would grow out of it their teenage years, if you ask them anything, but they still do it, what do you want to know for?
Yeah.
It's kind of like something simple becomes like a deep, dark secret.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can relate to that with a family member.
And you can understand it with teenagers, but when they get older and they're still doing it, you think, oh my God, just communicate, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can imagine my fire energy with the water houses and their water.
Like a tsunami. Yeah, I can. So, and just, you know, all of these things are so valuable to know how, you know, not just to have understanding of people, you know, and not be judgmental and really recognize, you know, it's all wonderful gifts. So anyway, I just wanted to put that.
I learned to do their teenage thing and it's whatever.
Oh, whatever. Yeah. Whatever. All good.
Actually, I like that.
Yeah. Oh, but you are, so that's wonderful. Thank you. All right, so let's start with the 4th house. But I've sort of split the 4th house into 2 because for me, it is the IC as well. And I think working with the IC and the 4th house, I sort of like to look at them not as 2 separate things, but certainly I like to examine the IC first and then move into the house and explore the home. And I love this picture because for me, and one of the things that I've put that's going to come up is that the IC is, of course, the entranceway into the 4th house arena. But it is also, you know, the roots of which we are established on. But I pick this picture because I like to think of the IC like a wellspring. It's like a deep well in which we can draw on. And if you imagine, you know, the IC being like this well, and when we drop our bucket down, when we wind it up, what do we actually have to source? And that's why the 4th house is so important, because it really establishes so much of how we are, grounded and fed and nurtured and able to grow. It's like a tree that we only dig a little hole and there's nowhere for the roots to go, and the first storm that comes along, it just blows over. So that's why I chose that picture. So the emotional roots, I'm just going to pop these all up. The emotional root system, the foundation from which we grow, the basement, which I'll explain in a minute, our wellspring, what we need to be fed and nourished so we grow to our fullest potential, so that the tree can bear fruit. It's a beautiful analogy that you'll often see, the root system, the branches, and then, the fruit that we bear when we're able to grow to our fullest potential. So I've just put there at the end where we can become entangled and need repotting, because the IC, it can be an entangled root system. And families are, we all have families. I'm sure all of you often hear stories about family and all have your own family stories. So the 4th house is where it all begins. It's, it's a very important piece. And where I put here the basement, I like to think, that the 4th house is often symbolic of where, just like a basement, where we store boxes that we are not yet ready to unpack. They will go down into the basement. And then something comes along and we're ready to sort of shine a light and go down and bring some boxes up and unpack them. And maybe we throw some of it away, and maybe we put some back down into the basement. But the 4th house is where we store a lot of this material, because it is the 1st house in the arc of intimacy, which is the 4th house to the 8th house. Anybody that's done any work with Stephen Forrest, and I am very fortunate to be teaching at Steve's school, and I learn so much every day through doing that, that the arc of intimacy begins at home, where we learn to trust and feel safe and feel secure. And I don't need to tell anyone here that home and family, I believe we choose, and I'm sure many of you do too, but I don't want to project what I believe onto anybody. But I certainly believe that we have a soul contract, we pay it forward, we come into this lifetime to work on the unresolved material, and we choose the family that's going to support us to do that, which doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to be sweetness and light. Maybe we need to choose a mother that's not going to nurture us in the way we as society feel like it needs to be, because there's something we need to learn to do for ourselves. That's a bit broad and vague, but we don't always come in to fairy tale families. So the 4th house is where all of this begins. Now, oops, that's it. I've just, as we move into the 4th house, I just put here that the 4th house is like the midnight hour. And if we, if we had more time tonight, and this is sort of like a 2-day weekend workshop that I'm just sort of introducing some of it to you. I know you know about it, but this is like a condensed 2-day workshop. And if we had the time to now close our eyes and take ourselves back to a childhood memory, we could do more work, which obviously we don't have time to do right now. But when we think about midnight, sometimes you can't sleep and you get up and it's, midnight and everything is quiet. Like, it's totally different. The moon's out, hopefully, if it's a brighter moon, and there's a different silence and it smells different, and you can just sit and be in that space. And so the 4th house has this magic, like midnight. And I mean, the moon is the queen of the night. So, it sort of fits that if we're up at midnight and everything's still and quiet, that we can take ourselves to another place. So I love to reflect on the 4th house in that way. So any thoughts or questions, everyone? Yeah, we're all good. So the 4th house is our home. It is the home within us and the home that we create outside of us. It is certainly our early childhood. It is the safety and the security and then all the nuances that we absorb from the first moment. I mean, for me, we've brought those forward. But just talking from a here and now perspective in this physical form, you know, it is every nuance and experience that we absorb, particularly in those pre-verbal years of 0 to 3, which is, of course, ruled by the moon. And now we're talking about the 4th house, so it all fits together. Home is where we begin and where we end. I mean, home is an interesting, you know, what is home? And again, I'd love that discussion, but just for us to reflect, what is home? It represents the inner images we have of ourselves. And I love to think about, you know, that well even, or a pond. When we look into a pond, we see a reflection of ourselves. So what is the inner reflections of ourselves that are held and dwell in the 4th house? Because they are definitely there, that inner image of who we are and how that's all built on from these beginnings that we're sharing right now. Our homeland, you know, we don't all, I'm sure there are people in this room that maybe were not born in this country, but this is your homeland now, but you also have your homeland where you've come from. So the 4th house is also symbolic of that, as well as the inherited ancestral attributes. What have I inherited from, you know, my ancestors? Like, I just use a tiny, simple example. You know, I found my dad at my Saturn return. So I didn't know any of my family until then on my dad's side. And I have Taurus on my IC. And my grandparents, and my dad is a Taurus, and my grandparents were all farmers. You know, very self-sufficient, very off the land, very organised, practical. My grandmother was very hardworking, you know, milked the goats and got the eggs and slaughtered the animals and made the bread. And like, that is so much part of me, even though I had no connection to them as I grew up. And yet it's definitely flows through those ancestral attributes, as well as the home that gets created. The family patterns, as I said, and roles, and a family of origin, and the secure base in which we launch from. You know, our emotional foundations is the 4th house, because if we think about home and family and the parental marriage, which we're going to talk about, as children, we absorb all of these things. You know, if mum and dad aren't getting along so well, we absorb that. If we are an only child or we have lots of siblings and we're not heard, we absorb that. Like, there's all the, you know, our parents do the best they can. And until we become parents, sometimes maybe we don't understand that, but, you know, we choose them for a reason. So, you know, whatever we have, it's a bit further down the track when we get further into the slideshow, but whatever sign we have, whatever element it is, whatever ruler, you know, Venus is the ruler of my IC. So what sign is Venus in? Where is Venus? What aspects does Venus make? Like, there are so many pieces to each house. And when working with the water houses, by looking at the rulers and, you know, where they are and what signs they're in, et cetera, really allows us to go deeply, because the water houses are deep. Not just the 8th house, all of them. And this is, you know, the house that's connected to the moon. Regardless, we might not have the moon ruling it, we might not have the moon anywhere near it, but how we are taught to nurture and I say the parental marriage, because the parental marriage doesn't necessarily need to be mum and dad. It can be, in my case, my mother and my grandmother. You know, in some cases, something else. So all of these nuances, influences, roots all come together in a cauldron of energy that the 4th house offers us in relation to how we learn what safety is and security is and all of these things. And they're big topics, which is why I'm saying, like, tonight, to give, I feel like there's always so much information to give. And I love to stop and do little exercises, which we don't get the privilege of doing tonight, but maybe another time we do a workshop or something, and people, because I think experience and talking is important as well, which is the reason why I've put these slides. So at the end of each piece, I've just put some reflective questions, because I thought if you would like the PowerPoint, you can actually do the questions for yourself and do some self-reflection. So I don't need to read all of these, and I am going to keep the time. I don't need to read them all, but I've really put them there so that if you would like the PowerPoint, you can reflect on your own fourth house and maybe answer some of these questions and maybe get a little bit deeper into what the fourth house means for you. Is there anyone that has an experience or a thought or just a feeling they'd like to share about their own, their beginning, their home, their family, that they can relate astrologically, or is that a little bit too personal? Yeah. Yes.
But
Thank you.
my previous on I said so retrograde.
Okay.
So a lot of oppositions and things like that.
I'm just going to repeat that for the, I don't know, can people at home hear this gentleman? Okay, so I'm just going to say what you said. So what's your name? Peter. So Peter has Pluto on his IC retrograding. Yeah, so it's there on, so please continue.
In Leo.
In Leo.
But like, yeah, I was reading Stephen Forrest, but I also read what's his name? Brian
Clark?
Tino.
I know.
Bill Tino.
Oh, Bill Tini, yeah.
Pluto. And they're both describing that sort of like thing, like what it's a hard, very hard thing to work with, right? And Stephen Forrest talks about it being like in sort of opposition with the moon, things like that. Well, it's not really opposition, but there's a lot of things going, like the moon's in the ninth house, and so like there's certain with the moon's fourth house and all that sort of stuff. He's just saying, like, the family have physical, some may have a physical problem, mental instability in another family member, and poverty and violence and all that. Everything but those things apply to my family. My mum had multiple sclerosis, my brother had schizophrenia, and my dad had a good job, but unfortunately we had to look after my mum and all that sort of stuff. So we had to pay for housekeeper and everything like that. So there's a lot more to the story.
Of course.
But it's
But I appreciate you sharing that.
yeah, but it's quite amazing. But that's like a starting point to my things I work on.
Absolutely. And something I didn't say before is whenever I look at a chart, I always ask myself, why has this soul chosen to have Pluto in the fourth house? Or whatever I'm looking at.
I've got a spiritual thing to do. Apparently I screwed up spiritually in my last life, and all this stuff in my ninth house. I've got the Chiron conjunction, the moon in the ninth house with the Chiron conjunct the north node in my ninth house with the moon stuck in the middle there.
Okay, so there's another signature suggesting that your emotional well-being, your home, your family is something you're here to heal. Just with a Pluto and a Chiron, without looking at your chart, obviously.
Yes, there's a message there.
Yeah. And you've chosen to excavate your fourth house in this lifetime, which means reclaiming something very, very deep and very important.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously, those experiences got you to do that work, which I'm sure you'll be doing all of your life.
And well, astrology also sort of woken me up and everything like that, like to know exactly, everything's happening right now and everything. I was meant to do this.
Yes.
This is what I'm meant to do.
Yes, yeah.
So it's quite amazing, but whether it happens or not is another question. So like a big task.
Well, based on what you just shared, it sounds to me like it's happening.
Okay. Well,
Which is
that
good.
Starting point's happening, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of other people involved in it.
Yeah, of course.
It's interesting that the thing that you said is, we looked after my mother, which is like a forecast and everything, all that major stuff going on, obviously. But the thing that I heard is, we looked after my mother.
Well, I had to have a housekeeper. That's all my dad had to work. He was a civil engineer for the Department of Weather, like that. So he had a good job. But we're like, everybody having all these other jobs, like firemen, and they had everything, but that was public service, and public service paid little.
Yeah.
Put so much money in superannuation. Then when he died, virtually all his money was kept by the government. Not a cent, we didn't get a cent, because my mum was also put in the home afterwards, and she died before that. So there's all this.
All this story, yeah, the
And,
Platonian story
That's
of security and safety and belonging. You can hear it with the, so it's, yeah. And I don't mean to cut, I don't want to cut you
No.
off because it's, no, don't be sorry. It's only because we could stay here till midnight, I'm sure, sharing, because it's emotional material.
abducted wealth, Pluto abducted wealth.
Sorry, I'm just, absolutely, the Greek myth, we could talk about all of that as well with Pluto and go through all the planets, but thank you for sharing that.
No, I mean, I can share, if you like, it's around my own house.
Yeah.
So I've got Cancer house. My moon is also in the 4th house. So, and the way that manifested or the way that showed up was a very protective mother.
Yeah.
Particularly all my life, but very protective. And
Yeah.
so that's how that.
And I will come right, yes, because I know you were before and I won't overlook you, sorry. All I was going to say is, and so, Pluto in the 4th, Moon in the 4th, choosing to have whatever, but in this case, those two planets, the Moon in the 4th is very sensitive. It's very gentle, but it's also seeking out security in a way where, nourishment and nurturing and really finding happiness, so it's lovely to hear, and, a protective mother. So, immediately the environment's set up, isn't it? That's lovely. Thank you. I know there's so much more you could share.
It's a question, what if there are no planets in the 4th house?
Great question. Should I come to that at the end? Or is it okay for me to answer it now?
Whatever you are
What do you think's best?
Okay, let me give you a quick, thank you. Let me give you a little bit of an answer now. If there were no planets in your 4th house, that's what you said?
Yeah.
So for me, as I said earlier, transits, progressions, solar returns, that's the first part. You're always going to have something visiting. It's a little bit like walking out of your bedroom one morning into your lounge room and suddenly there's 3 people there. It's like, where did you all come from? Because you've got transits or something that's moved into that house. And so you're going to learn, they're fields of experience. We choose to have a planet there because this is where we're to draw the experience to learn part of the lessons. Now, you may not necessarily have needed to have planets there to draw from the experience, but you'll have visitors. But where is the ruler of your IC? What sign is that in? What house is that in? What aspects are being made? Not only in your natal chart, but by transit. So could you tell me what you have as the ruler of your IC?
No, because currently.
That's okay. That's okay.
Sorry, I'm not trying to.
No, that's fine. Hypothetically, let's imagine the moon rules your IC, hypothetically, and transiting Pluto comes to sit on your moon, and your moon's up in the 11th house. Just hypothetical. Moon rules the 4th, transiting Pluto comes to the moon. The moon is obviously having a Pluto transit, so is the 4th house. The 4th house is also then going to be under the radar of Pluto for the entirety of the ruler and anything at aspects. So you haven't chosen to have that as one of your main stages, but there will be times that there'll be plays on there that you'll, sorry, I just admit, sorry. Yeah, there'll be times that, it's a little bit like an orchestra, or when we go to something, sometimes there's a lot playing on that stage and other times there isn't. But yeah, for you, I'd say there'd be sometimes, but there's always going to be activation of that rule, which is really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Okay, was someone else going to? Yes, sorry.
The planets in the 10th house also skew the results of the
Yeah,
4th house.
great thought. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So, if there are a lot of planets in the 10th house, that will absolutely flow into the 4th. But, even though they're there to blossom, to open up, whatever it might be, through the experiences of the world, that is absolutely going to impact your internal root system.
There are a lot of planets in my 10th house.
Yeah, Absolutely. It was a great,
That's where comes the balance between the home life and the career.
absolutely.
And the personal.
Because
One may come at the cost of the other, yeah.
absolutely, because polarities
It's a polarity.
always play out, and it's not just the polarity, you know, if you've got lots of Aries, you're going to meet Libra.
The seesaw.
It's also that if you've got a lot of planets in the 10th house, there is going to be an element of the 4th house that you want to work with. So thank you
I've
for
got a
the
stellium in my
10th house.
10th
Yeah,
house.
so good point. Thank you. So only for time, because it's lovely to get the and here's just a few people. I just popped this in. A few people that have the sun and the moon in the 4th house. So you can see who's up there. Carl Jung is up there. Harry Styles, Woody Allen. That's a story in itself. Woody Allen. I don't know those of you that know Woody Allen's story, but boy, does he have a story of family. Anyway, just a few people for you to have a look. All right. Now, I'm going to read this quickly. This is just a poem that to me gets us to walk into the 8th house together. So it says, the moment that you left me. The moment that you left me, my heart split in two. One side filled with memories, the other side died with you. I often lay awake at night when the world was fast asleep and take a walk down memory lane with tears upon my cheeks. Remembering you is easy because I do it every day, but missing you is a heartache that never goes away. I hold you tightly within my heart, and there you will remain as my life goes on without you, but will never be the same. And I just put that in there because to me, it's a lovely entry into the 8th house. And, you know, to begin to talk about the 8th house, you know, we go from, so now we're at the last house of the arc of intimacy. You know, we go through all of these houses that are all about how intimacy begins in the home and then goes into the playful, creative ability to, you know, find romance and do all of that. And then we get into the 6th house of reality and day-to-day work with the people that we meet. And then the 7th house. And now we end up in the 8th house. And I know we're talking about the water houses, but I love this picture because for me, the 8th house is about learning to see in the dark. And I mean that in a very positive light. Pardon the pun. But, you know, the 8th house is filled with opportunity, and yet it can be so feared because we can't see, we can't find our way because, you know, it's dark in there. And, you know, you could say that the 8th house is not for the faint-hearted. But again, we all have an 8th house, you know, regardless of whether we have planets or not, we all have an 8th house. And like I said earlier, there will be moments in time, maybe it's part of our whole life's contract, or maybe there are periods of time we work with it more intensely than other periods. But nonetheless, there are so many pieces. And you mentioned, you mentioned Pluto, and you said about the story of Demeter and Persephone. And of course, the story of Demeter and Persephone, for me, is so connected to the 8th house. You know, it's the story, it's such a classic, beautiful story but, you know, it's tied to grief and loss and attachment and separation. And that's part of the story. But in that story, it's also about re-empowerment, you know, and so the 8th house definitely is the Demeter and Persephone house. So I've just put, for me, there's many layers. All the house have layers. But this house for me has, you know, this group of things, for example, joint money, joint resources, other people's money, which is different again to me because, you know, you've got money, but we're not putting our money together. But, you know, maybe we're putting our money together. So, you know, whether if we choose to join our resources or join our money, that's still other people's money, but not in the way that somebody else's money they may lend me money like a bank or something. So certainly money is an 8th house thing. And when we, again, you know, you mentioned about polarities, you know, so we know the opposite house is the 2nd house, which is about my money. And the 8th house is about, well, how are we going to put our money together? And a lot more, you know, because I guess another one of the things on here is going to be trust. And I think you've got to trust someone to open a bank account with, because it's you know, I don't know too many people that open bank accounts with people that they don't trust, hopefully, although I'm sure it happens. So other people's money, inheritances through marriage and through the family, and taxes and insurance and all of that stuff. So for me, this is a pocket of the 8th house. But then we have another pocket, very different. Sexuality. Now, I just want to note here, I'm very, you know, this is an introduction because, as I've said, this is a consolidated weekend. These are all, you know, pieces to go into. You know, when you're talking to a client or a friend or looking at your own sexuality, that's a big topic. It's not a little topic. It's not like, okay, look, yeah, a lot of 8th house sexuality, yeah, okay, tick, gone, next. You know, it's a lot of depth. So I know I'm just sort of throwing some words out right now without going into it, bless you. But certainly sexuality, death, and our attitude to death, and our own mortality. Big topics. The occult, taboos, and going into the depths that others shy away from. Like I said, getting comfortable in the dark. This is an 8th house, you know, life bonds. Now, we know it's the natural house of Scorpio. We know it's the natural house of Pluto. And, you know, we all have an 8th house. And when we're working with the 8th house, we want to go there. Like, we don't want to shy away, because the 8th house is demanding us to do that. It's not like the 7th house where we can splash around on the surface and maybe have a snorkel and goggles. Now we need breathing apparatus because we're going down. And that's not down as in dying, but or maybe that could be part of it. But we need to really allow ourselves to face and confront perhaps some things that are not so easy. Because this house, like all of the water houses, is about psychological and emotional complexity. All of the water houses are about that. But I think this one, maybe even more so, deeply, deeply intense. And that's, you know, this was something Steve actually said to me when we were talking once, I don't know, ages ago, about Scorpio. And he said, you know, how often we hear people say, oh, you know that Lawrence, he's so intense. Or Lawrence might say, oh, I'm too intense. And Steve, who has a Scorpio South Node, says if anyone ever says you're too intense, his answer is, for who? Because we don't want to make, you know, if we have a strong 8th house, we want to own that intensity. We want to own that depth. We want to own our need for privacy and sensual encounters and perhaps some trauma. But we don't want to make it wrong. So, and you know, I'm a very serious person. I'm a very sensitive person. I'm a very intense person. I never say anymore, I'm too serious. My mother said that to me all my growing up. Why are you so serious? Well, look at my chart. You'll know. But yes, so this is like another section of the 8th house, all big topics to explore. Deep life bonds and life partners. Intimacy and intense one-on-one emotional connection, being in the dark, as I said, and feeling our way. Trust, I didn't put another word in there, which is truth. Because for me, the 8th house, like Pluto, is about trust and truth and privacy and confidentiality. And whenever I have a client that has a strong 8th house, it is something I will always very gently and tenderly hold. Because, you know, if you have someone that's sitting there like that, which often can be the case, or don't say anything, they've got to feel safe. I'm just sharing that with you for any charts. I mean, you may probably already know that, but anyway, It's very important. And then, of course, there are themes, as we've said already, of grief and loss, of betrayal, of personal power, which often may mean power struggles, because, you know, trauma and crisis is birthed in this house. And if we have planets in the 8th house, and again, I come back to that question I said before when I'm looking or sitting with a chart, why has this soul chosen to have 8th house planets? Well, there's obviously something deeply penetrating the surface that they are really looking to dive into and heal by confronting the pain and coming up to the surface to release it. And like I said, it's about going, if you've got a strong 8th house person that trusts you, you can really do some great, amazing rebirthing work or whatever it might be. Were you going to say something before? No?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, that it's deep-rooted transformations.
Yes.
And actually each house represents, each water house represents a different water body. It's like a very deep lake.
Yes. Yes.
So
Deep ocean.
the 12,000 more of a ocean.
Yeah.
And the 4,000 more like the river.
The river that runs.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. That's beautiful. And absolutely, I
It's
agree with
a
you.
different nature, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a lovely. Yeah, and of course, again, the sign, the rulers, all of those things are very important. And I have 2 planets in the 8th house, and the 8th house has been a big part of my journey. And you know, grief counselling is something I was always, when I did my counselling diploma, I always did my assignments on grief, or, you know, so it's an important house to me because I think, you know, we need to honour, you know, if a soul comes in with 8th house work to do, then they've signed a contract, something that's like, okay, you're ready to confront this now. So, as we are for everything, but if we're confronting things of 3rd house nature, it's different to confronting things of an 8th house nature, obviously.
And even in astronomy, it goes more towards the galactic black hole, the absence of light, or trying to find light.
Can you say that for me again?
Even astronomically, it goes towards the galactic black hole.
Yes.
So it's about absence of light or trying to find light,
Trying to
where
find
light gets
light.
almost absorbed.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's fantastic.
That with the sun eclipse in the 8th house.
Yes, yes, that's right. You said that before. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's and eclipses. I mean, that's a whole nother, and Saros series. I mean, they're right. It's very interesting. So the last piece there I've just put is the atmosphere of the parental marriage, the family patterns of loss and grief, and the lost or incomplete patterns of the family, and the value systems of the family. So what's the family's value around me? Because if you grow up, you know, in a family where, you know, maybe money is a little scarce. And I remember, you know, watching my grandmother sitting at the dining table every week doing the budget, making sure there was enough food for the rent, enough food for enough food for this or money for that. And so whatever you experience, you know, in relation to what the family's values are around 8th house themes, you know, that maybe as we become adults, you know, we start to clash with some of the values of the family. Maybe we want to work through those values. But this last piece that I've put about the atmosphere of the parental marriage. So if we think about the 4th house, and this is all, like, as I said, there's so many pieces here. I'm not meaning to jump around too much. But if we think about where things begin in the 4th house and we absorb the relationship energy, and then we go into the 8th house where we're looking to create life bonds. Now, often we don't meet someone and stay with them for our whole existence. We have different partners. Some people do, and whatever, I think it's different for everyone. But often we go into the 8th house with these nuances of what we've absorbed in the 4th, and we then repeat that unconsciously with the people we choose until we work through whatever that might be, and then can have partners that are of equal autonomy to ourselves, where we can, you know, maybe we choose a partner that's going to repeat the patterns that we learned in the 4th house. So this is also part of the 8th house terrain. So, you know, they're not, like I said, to just talk about it for a few minutes is hard for me because I'm not a surface person. But hopefully just in the things that we're sharing gets you to be able to think more about some of your own chart. So, or charts of the people that are close to you. And again, just put this up. I've just put this here so that you can reflect, if you want the PowerPoint, on some of these questions, because these are great questions to think about, you know, reflecting on the level of trust in your family. What was trust broken? Is that something that you learned really early on? And so you can attract partners that break your trust. I mean, that's a little bit lighthearted the way I'm saying it, but I'm sure you all get what I mean. You know, what was learnt and developed and felt in the 4th house in relation to intimacy that comes into the 8th. As I said, the inherited family values around many things. I mean, often, there was one piece here. Yeah, I said, how do you feel about the images and imprints of the parental marriage? That's all right, that's something. So these are questions for you if you choose to reflect on that I've just put in here for you. I had a thought then and now it's gone. Never mind, that happens. That's a Uranian thing, I think. But yes, so the 8th house is definitely a terrain where we need to have, find the people that we want to bond with and learn to develop trust and all of these beautiful pieces, because it is a house where we're reclaiming our power. That's part, and our truth and our ability to state that and share it. That's all very important. So just a few people now here for you with 8th house suns and moons. Interesting when you look down those lists.
You've got 2 killers in the moon here.
Say that again. What did I?
Putin and O.J. Simpson of the
Henry VIII. Do you know Henry VIII? What was I doing recently? I can't remember what it was now. It was a chart. Oh, yes, I do know. I'm running an asteroid course at the moment, and we were doing Juno, right? So Juno, you know, the goddess, Hera, all about relationship, all about equality, self-empowerment, having her power taken away, all that. And I was trying to think of some people that might have a strong Juno. So I thought of Henry VIII because I lived just up the road from Hampton Court when I went to school in England with my mother's English. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. He is a sun conjunct Juno and a whole load of other things that connect into Juno. I was like, oh my God, this is all too much. So yeah, just that you mentioned that. But yeah, he was a sun Juno. Yeah, very interesting. Anyway, that's another story. Oh, wrong button. Sorry, guys. All right. So it's okay, we're going good. The 12th house, probably one of my favourites. And I love what you just said before about the river and the lake and the ocean. It's really lovely. The 12th house is, I think, can be very misconstrued, if that's the right way of saying it, or just misunderstood. I am definitely not knocking any other form of astrology. But obviously different modalities have different ways of looking at the chart. And I know from a traditional, I have a lot of planets in the 12th house. So from a traditional perspective, the 12th house is not always viewed in a very positive light. As I said, I have total respect for traditional astrologers. But when I had a chart done once by a traditional astrologer, I must admit I left feeling stressed, because the 12th house is not painted in a way that I see it. So again, there are a number of segments to this house. So let's just explore some of them first. So I guess before I go through this, you know, for me, the 12th house is about elevating our consciousness. Now, I guess that sort of sounds like a bit of a funny thing to say because the whole chart is about the elevation of our consciousness. The fact that our essence comes into this life form and it, you know, takes up residency in a physical body so we can expand through being in here is sort of a funny concept. But yeah, it's all about our connection to the cosmos and how we can elevate our consciousness and transcend to a higher place. That's a big part of the 12th house. But let's just look at the segments. So the connection to the cosmos, the collective consciousness, states of bliss, intuition, the unknown, addictions, and spiritual awakening. Now, again, all big topics. What are we addicted to? You know, we can be addicted. I mean, addictions, you know, if we're talking 12th house, Pisces, Neptune, all different, obviously, but connected. You know, is something too painful for us to be able to actually realistically look at it, that we need to escape? You know, obviously, the whole drama triangle, again, when I did my counselling diploma years ago, I remember them talking. I was the only alternative person in the whole group, and I did it through Relationships Australia. It was a 3-year diploma. And me being me, I couldn't say, oh, yes, I'm just here to become a counsellor. I had to say I'm an astrologer and I want to have a counselling diploma. And I had a Virgo teacher, and I always remember her looking at me when I said I was an astrologer, thinking, oh, my God, what have we got here? But she came around. She was great, actually. But now I've got to tell you. But I'll come back to it. Spiritual life, it's a very important part of the 12th house. And addictions, that's drama triangle. That's what I was going to say. Thank you. They taught the drama triangle, which is the rescuer, the victim, and the persecutor, and how that triangle is something that people move around. You know, if I'm a victim, I'm going to find a rescuer to save me, or the rescuer is going to come and find me because I need saving. But then I get resentful and I become the persecutor, and so on. And this is the drama triangle. And I remember sitting in class going, Neptune plus, 12, that's not, So 12th house definitely can be where we feel victimized. It can be where we need, to find something, states of bliss that don't allow us to totally detach from reality. Again, it's very, as you said, this is a huge ocean, vast, infinite, boundless. That's the 12th house. It is universal love of the great mother herself. So, yeah, it's beautiful. Trust in something greater than us that we cannot see. That is definitely, intuition, people say, oh, why do you think that? Or what do you say that for? Oh, there's no rational, nothing to back it up apart from I just know. I know it in my bones, I trust the universe. I trust my knowing. I trust my intuition that the universe has got my back, and I'm going to trust my intuition and I'm going to go there. Because I believe that the bullseye is already there. We just got to find it, So the universe is all about that. So it's about faith and vision. And I always say to people that have a strong Neptune transit, or Neptune in their life, whatever it might be, or planets on the North Node or the South Node, like Amy Winehouse, which is another very interesting chart, that you've got to work with your vision. And the 12th house is also very much like that. It is about trusting and allowing yourself to have form and not be enmeshed or lost. Because, of course, you can be lost. In fact, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a client that I've known for a long time. I see her once a month. She's a beautiful girl. Neptune on her south node. And right now she has a 2-degree Aries ascendant. So, of course, Neptune is on her ascendant, which it has been for some time. I know we're talking about the 12th house, but it's still in the 12th house. And, you know, she called me on the way down here to share something with me. And I asked her at the end of the conversation, are you okay? And she said, I just feel totally lost. And I said to her, and this is very 12th house, I said, do you want to, God, can I remember? I can't remember. I came up with some beautiful thing I said to her about the 12th house, but basically I said, you know, when we lose something, we go find it. And that's what you're being asked to do right now, to emerge, not submerge. And, you know, what does that mean? Anyway, very much 12th house energy, you know, that do we know where you end and I begin, or are we just totally emerged and enmeshed? Because even though it's not Neptune, we can still get totally lost in this house if we lose our vision and lose sight of, you know, what our dreams and our faith are. And of course, the world of dreams and Carl Jung, you know, that this is a wonderful house. I think who works with people journal their dreams? Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're so powerful. And working with them from an imagery point of view, you know, often people will say, oh, you know, I dreamt about X, Y, Z, and I looked up the book and it told me this. But, you know, of course, dreams are not anything to do with what a book tells you. We all pull images. And the 12th house, you know, this is 12th house work. Working behind closed doors. And, you know, when we think about things like monasteries and institutions and even hospitals, you know, they're very much about what goes on behind closed doors, as well as what goes on behind closed doors in our own homes and our own lives. And how do we create sacred spaces? That's another important piece, because, you know, I even suggest to people with strong 12th house energy, whether it be natally or because other things are happening, you know, to have an altar, to create something sacred to you that you're honouring. You know, it's so important. And to give yourself time with yourself. And, you know, that sometimes is, you know, you've got a really fiery person maybe, or, you know, it's not always easy for people to go within and shut things. Not, you don't have to shut the world out, but to just find that sacred space. It cannot always be easy, but it's a very strong part of this house. So completions and endings, cycles, surrendering, loss and sadness, in utero, I'm just going to read them and then talk about them. In utero experiences and our connection with mother during gestation, and institutions. Now, again, all big topics. And I have got a few charts that I'm going to share in just a moment of people with these houses strong. But, you know, how to support yourselves or others, you know, when the 12th house is activated, you know, because I think it's a very humble house. And actually the 6th house is very humble, which is, of course, the opposite house. The Virgo house is about learning. You know, service is humbling. And so we're talking about the opposite house, and it is also about service in a lot of ways. But I wanted to share something with you. Sorry about these glances. Loss and sadness and our connection. You know, I remember seeing many years ago a 12th house picture, and it was like Poseidon sitting at the bottom of the ocean and carrying all the feeling energy of the collective. And certainly with the 12th house, we have an ability to tap into something. But we need boundaries, we need containment so it doesn't flood us, which is, you know, being able to tap into things that we don't even, that are so much greater than we are, but we have this potential. But I just wanted to share something about in utero experiences. And again, it's something I'd love to hear more from you if anyone had anything to share. But it is unbelievable how powerful the experiences that we absorb before birth through our mother I don't know if anybody, I have some stories from clients that I won't share now, which I have permission to share, but they take too long. But does anyone have a feeling or a thought around that? I have one I can share if you don't. As to how, you know, from the 9th house to the ascendant, you know, from conception to birth and that last period with the 12th house, which is like being, I mean, the 12th house is like being in an ashram. But from a gestational period, like I will share with you, my mother, I had a conversation with my mother years ago about a friend of mine who was couch surfing. And I said, excuse me, I said to her, oh my God, I don't know how she's doing it. I could not do that. And like, I would feel so, like I've got this thing about fronting up uninvited or overstaying my welcome. Like I won't do that. I'll feel really uncomfortable. Anyway, my mother said to me, oh, I did that years ago. I said, you did that? When did you do that? And she said, oh, when I was pregnant with you. And I went, oh my God. Like the penny, it was just like this little light went on as to why I am the way I am about dropping in on people, overstaying my welcome. No, I won't stay. Or is it okay? I'll come out, like all of that. And I said, how long? Oh, I just, when they were ready for me to go, I left. I went, okay, it made so much sense. And it's only a little thing and I could share others, but power of that and how this 12th house plays into it. It's remarkable.
Not my story, but, and I can't think of who the psychologist is, he's still alive and well.
Oh,
He was,
Brian
mum was
Weiss.
pregnant with him in the Nazi concentration camp.
Mhm.
He's since then, as an adult, become a psychologist, and he often discusses, you'll see it on YouTube quite often and stuff like that, Facebook and YouTube, about how that affected him, but not only him, because he's now a psychologist, obviously, and how he believes that that in utero experience of what the mother experienced in Auschwitz, you know, like starvation, but
yeah.
terrorism, all that, would affect the baby in utero.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the, you know, he brings it up quite often.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very, I mean, all the houses are powerful, but the water houses in connection to all of these things we're talking about and that experience, those experiences, yeah, they are very, very, very powerful.
I think it's difficult to remember generally being in utero unless you've gone through that psychology from the 60s, I can't remember what it is, rebirthing, you know, rebirthing.
Yeah.
Because in utero, we're in a circular, spherical, watery emphasis with not a cubical concept of, you know, the Egyptian concept of the man emerging from the cube. Therefore, you do not have spatial awareness of left, right, front, back, up, down, or center for that matter. There is only the consciousness of the umbilical cord.
Yeah.
So that's why when babies are born for a long time, they do not know they have legs. Because the legs are confused with the umbilical cord.
Yes.
So I think it's difficult to have a memory that you can't place in a time and a space kind of thing.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. And that's a huge thing that you just put out there. And I mean, I believe that the soul's embedded in our feeling heart memory, a soul memory, which is
the cellular memory.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this all connects. But yeah, I
cellular memory is there, but it's not a conscious kind of a thing that
it's not conscious here.
Pick it up as an adult or something, you know.
But it's conscious in here.
Something would have to trigger it, like your experience of what your mother said to you, and you think, oh my goodness, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
The whole thing came clear.
Yes. Yes. And definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start and then you next.
Water is one of the elements that can be imprinted with memory, and that's what happens.
Absolutely.
And ocean is again boundless because it's only bound by a illusionary horizon, and the horizon shifts. So that's why the 12th house has kind of no boundaries.
Yeah.
And no sense of like orientation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, it's very important to have boundaries, to have containment. Otherwise, we're everywhere, aren't we?
Well, you know,
Yes.
But that's one of the aspects of the 12th house to break the boundaries.
Yes. It's a bit of a dichotomy in a way because Yes,
or the boundary is illusional, an illusion like a horizon.
yes, yeah.
You know, Morris writes on that 12th house, his book is on the 12th house, about being that private birth thing and, you know, that no boundaries sort of thing, yeah.
And I'm going to throw something else in just a minute.
Oh, it's a different matter, but like about May 21, I think it was, Jupiter went into Pisces for a little while and Neptune was in Pisces.
Mhm.
Some photographer took a picture of an ocean wave and there's Poseidon in the waves.
Oh, wow. Oh, I can just see that. You have to share it after. That's great.
Yeah, good.
You know, the 12th house is also very much about, just put this back on. It's very much about being a pattern breaker, which is the last piece I've got on here. And for me, if you have planets in the 12th house, or if they're coming into your life in other ways, you have put your hand up to be a pattern breaker for the ancestors. You know, it's like that movie Avatar where they take their tails to plug into the tree so they hear the voices of the ancestors. That's the 12th house. And if you come in with that work to do, you are not only healing yourself, you are healing all those that have gone before you and all those that are to come next. That is very important 12th house work. And, you know, the amount of times I hear from clients that have strong 12th houses, and I might ask them a question about this or that, or gently go somewhere, and they will just share these unbelievable ancestral stories that they're working on, or, you know, the the patriarch going back generations of men that were alcoholics or women that were alcoholics, you know, and they have a 12th house son, you know, or, you know, they're working on, you know, so being able to be visible and seen. And there are so many stories that I hear from people working with their 12th house that is so just incredibly insightful for me, and hopefully also for the client that's working through this energy. So 12th house, very powerful. And I feel horrendous just skipping over it like this. But anyway, let's move on because it's now just after 8:30 and I just want to show you a couple of other charts. So again, I put this in for you to reflect on why you may have chosen to have planets in the 12th house if you have them, and what that might look like for you so that you can explore a little more. And there's a few people that have 12th house suns and 12th house moons. It's interesting, you know, how many singers you see, artists. So I'm not going to talk too much about this one. I'm going to just put this up. There's a whole load of questions on here. And again, like I said, this is more work that we do when we split off and talk about things. But why do we choose to have planets anywhere? But for this talk, why do we choose to have planets in the 4th, 8th and 12th houses? And I've just put a whole load of things up here for you to look at. You know, where do you retreat when you need to refresh and renew? That's a lovely 12th house, or even an 8th house or a 4th house, really. You know, these are all questions. In what way may your family be changing, and that in this lifetime you're part of the evolution of the change? In what way are you being asked to find a healthy flow in relation to sexuality, or being able to look deeply into developing autonomy and trust in your lifetime? You know, so these are all questions that you can have a look at, but certainly these are the questions that are posed to us when we are working with these houses. And so we have to take our time with them, not hurry them, hold the space. Now, I just would like, I think if we can just spend perhaps 5 minutes on a couple of these charts, then have a couple of questions, and that'll bring us to probably about 10 to, and then we can, is that going to be too late? Is that all right for everybody?
You normally need to be out by.
So let's just do a few minutes.
Yeah.
Let's just have a look at these. So here is a chart, obviously, of someone. It is someone that is well known, that is alive. Now, you might know who this is if you do lots of chart work, but maybe, hopefully, none of you do know who this is. And for those of you online, now, on first glances, now, as I've said right at the beginning, as an evolutionary astrologer, I look to the nodal story to understand why this soul is here. And that then is the basis for everything else in the chart, for me. So on first glances of this chart, we see a Sagittarian sun with a Gemini moon, a strong second house, a ninth house with the moon there, Libra rising, which takes us to Venus. There's lots of things that we would obviously look at as you're all just feeling your way in the chart. And I always say to people and to students, when you first get a chart in front of you, do not think about it. Just feel it. Just let the chart call you. What are you drawn to? Because everyone's going to have a different way of approaching a chart. And I think it's very important that we trust our intuition and we go to what sings to us so we can work with people. So it's not about coming from the head. It's about also holding the space to create the magic, to connect and talk to people's hearts and let people be seen and validated. So we've got to get out of our heads sometimes. But we have to have knowledge, but then we have to allow the symbols to talk to us. So I'm happy. I would love to hear from anybody. Is there anything in this chart you're drawn to? Yes.
The second house, Mars, which is in its own sign, and then the 8th house, Uranus and Saturn, and then the nodal axis going to the 11th. So something jumbled up or misuse of other people's finances or something around that.
Mm-hmm. Totally valid things to say. 100% totally valid. I guess, because again of time, I'm sorry. Let me, if feel free to interrupt me. If there's something you see, and thank you for sharing that. If there's something that you see, please shout it out. But otherwise, let me just guide you a little bit as to why I believe this is such an important Waterhouse chart. Because the rulers, so I don't know how many of you work from an evolutionary perspective, but for me, the rulers of the South Node are where I want to begin, because I want to understand who is this soul and what's the work they're here to do and what's the character profile and how is that part of their gift, but how is that part of what they remember coming undone? So this soul's now, obviously, it's an Aquarian South Node, which means some of you might go to Uranus and some of you might go to Saturn. But as someone who started out as a modern astrologer, I probably lean into Uranus a little bit more, but I am always going to consider Saturn. You have to. In my opinion, you have to look at both. Now, in this chart, it's made very easy for us because there they are together, Uranus and Saturn in the 8th house. So this person's soul, DNA, contract, what they are here to decode in this lifetime starts in the 8th house. And if I was here giving you an example of how to work with the nodal story, first of all, we'd be here at least another 2 hours. So I'm not going to do that, probably actually till the morning. But in knowing this person starts in the 8th house, I would love to show you more on how to work with that. But that tells me a lot about the fact that this soul has experienced something that may be traumatic, that may be of a sexual nature. Now, it may not tick every box, but it might. Somebody who comes in here that is, there's 2 sides to this coin. Actually, there's more than that. So Uranus and Saturn as the rulers in the 8th house, are about many things. And Uranus is about freedom. It's about liberation. It's about being a revolutionary. It's about radical, progressive behavior. Saturn is about getting real about it, being an authority. Yeah. being able to have the structures in place to get real. Now, on one side of the coin, from an evolutionary soul perspective, it feels to me like something came seriously undone in relation to having freedom and being unique and being able to express oneself, and that there may have been authority figures or fear or rejection or maybe a father story. Like there's all sorts of things if we had more time.
Because there's a Sun-Saturn opposition, so arbitrary imposed authority. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we could bring all of that in too. But we have it here in the root, starting in the 8th house. What's the trauma? What's the, what is it? So because I can't build too much, I'm going to tell you who this is. This is and the next slide tells you something about their life. So again, you can read through it if you get the PowerPoint.
Next slide.
Yes.
So there are about 83, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I was just doing the trading.
Oh, my computer's about to die. Could we plug it in, please? I didn't think about that. Yeah, it's just I brought the cable. Sorry to not do it. So thank you. This is the chart of Billy Connolly. Now, Billy Connolly, thank you. Billy Connolly is such an inspiring person. I've done a lot of work on his life, and I use this chart a lot with people, with students. Just to give you a tiny taste, Billy Connolly's mother, for a big story, but she left, thank you, she left her boys when they were just Billy and his sister, there was a boy and a girl, when they were very young, 2 or 3 years old, she left. There's a big story around that. And that meant that they had to go to the father's siblings. So Billy and his sister got sent off to the sisters, the aunties, basically, who he speaks to this day about the trauma, the abuse, the mental abuse, the trauma, everything they experienced from the father's siblings. I'm saying it to you so you can see the patterns here. Uranus and Saturn, the father's siblings start to look after these 2 children and abuse them. And after about 7 years, Billy's father comes back from the Navy, or maybe 6 years, and for the next 7 years sexually abuses Billy. And it's all here in the very beginning. If I did this whole nodal story, it would blow you out of this room. It's so incredible how powerful this is. And because this is such an 8th house story. Anyway, he went on to have addictions. We've got Neptune, of course, in aspect to the rulers in the 12th house. And who saved him? His wife, who was his psychotherapist. Neptune, Libra, trine. From an evolutionary perspective, that trine is, where did he go down? How did he, what's the word I like to use? A trine to the rulers of the South Node is going to indicate where you fell back into old patterns that didn't serve you. And he's had a life of addictions, which he has broken. His life is an absolute living, breathing, as all our charts are, of how someone with an 8th house beginning can face the darkness and rise up. And that's exactly what this man has done, and it's very inspiring.
Don't you have some sort of dementia or something?
No, it's not dementia. It's not Parkinson's. It's one of those that he says, he's written a book, he's talked a lot very openly about the trauma in his childhood, the sexuality, all the things, but how, that it's all part of where the physical manifestation of this disease. Now he believes it's all very much because of how long it was suppressed in his life and so on and so on. But, even the fact that, the evolutionary flip side of this is that why has he chosen this chart? Why did he choose to have a Sagittarian sun with a Gemini moon? Here he is, a comedian, making documentaries, travelling around the world, talking to people. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched them, but they're absolutely brilliant. But anyway, there's a lot to this man. And I picked this chart to share with you. And there's information. Whoops. about him here. But he really had a very 8th house soul, and he has worked through that, which is very, very commendable that he had the strength to do it. Now,
That's right, why?
he certainly did. He certainly did. And there's a lot in there. I mean, even just that is an 8th house thing. His whole story is so 8th house. It's amazing. Now, I know you said we need to be out of here. I can just tell you who this is in a bit and let you look at the charts afterwards. This is actually a very well-known actor. This is Keanu Reeves. And here is a man that I'll just, again, it's a big story, and it's a very, very strong 4th and 12th house. And if you know about his family life, it started very much with his family not being solid, not being secure, not being safe. But, he could have chosen to be an addict. He's got a strong 12th house to escape. He could have chosen a lot of things, but he certainly has. Again, I think he's very inspiring. And when you know a lot about how he leads his life, he is definitely doing this 4th and 12th house. And when interviewed, I just want to read this little bit. Keanu Reeves was asked if he was spiritual, and his answer was, I believe in God, faith, the self, the inner self, passion, and things. And that he was a very spiritual and supremely bountiful person. But he was also asked one day, what do you think when somebody dies? Like in an interview, probably trying to be smart, because knowing he practices like a Buddhist faith and stuff. And his answer was, I think the people that love you will miss you. And I thought, what a beautiful response. But he's, a very strong 4th and 12th house. And just because of time, I'm just going to show you the last chart. This is the chart. Again, you can see if we had, more ability to go through it, a very strong 4th, 8th, and 12th house. And I really encourage you to look at this chart in whatever way you explore a chart, because this is the chart of Julian Assange. And boy, has he got a 4th, 8th, 12th life. I mean, there is so much that we could talk about. And you all know he's returned to Australia. He's been reunited with his wife. I guess he's probably keeping that very quiet now, but there's information on the next slide that talk about the 4th, 8th, and 12th house and how activated that was from the moment he was born. So, he has the ruler of his south node in the 8th house. He has that in Cancer, disposited by the moon in Scorpio in the 12th house. Here is a man that was literally a prisoner in an embassy, spent time in prison, done all of the stuff, as a spy, like, not a spy, but, uncovering so many things. It's a fascinating chart. So again, if you've got time to look over it, please do. So as per usual, I've run out of time. So I am so sorry to have done that, because I know I wanted to give you a good introduction and feeling into the houses. So I hope, I don't know, Ben, what we need to do with the computer now.
Yeah, thank you.
But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everyone for being here. I know we haven't got any time for questions now. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, to be continued. Thank you so much, everybody. Have you done it?
Yeah, well, I was just showing all these.
It's apparent that I haven't had a chance to hear what anybody else has got to say. Maybe there were questions. Is that still recording?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. If Mars is like this in conjunct with Aquarius, I don't know what will happen when it's opposite Pluto. It's Jenny. I don't know if I can still see the slight line. It must be okay now. Pisces is in my 12th house still. I don't know if I can add, can we answer these afterwards? It's probably going to be a bit hard.
I think.
If anybody wants to, they can email. They can email. Anybody wants to do anything, ask anything, they're welcome to email, and I'm very happy to answer it. Yeah, all right.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, so it's